today we have with us the CEO, Bane Hunter, CEO of GetSwift. Bane, welcome. Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. And I think let's start immediately with what I think is always very important to do. A bit of a basic overview for the audience about who is GetSwift and what is GetSwift's business.
Brilliant. Thank you again. So what is GetSwift? I'd like to start with like a catchy phrase that kind of goes right to the heart of the matter, what we do. We democratize logistics technology. Now, that sounds fancy, but in principle, here's what it really means. We offer an integrated suite of solutions, logistics, e-commerce, workforce management, infrastructure project capabilities across probably as a broad scale and verticals that you could imagine. So whether it's a mom and pop store or a small local baker on Main Street, or it's a large multinational, we have some component, something on our platform that will enable them to effectively manage their full life cycle in terms of deliveries. Now, what's very important to mention here is we're a SaaS company. So we're a technology company. We don't manage our own drivers. We manage either outsourced drivers or client drivers in that respect via the software. We don't have what do you call our trucks or any sort of vehicles in that respect. Effectively, what it is, it's a software solution pretty much for the planet that'll allow you to get up and running in no time.
I will come back to the planet concept in a second because we're talking here about the global solution, the way that you express it. But before we get there, so technology solution focused on helping companies to manage delivery. How have you been impacted by COVID? That must have been meaningful.
COVID has been difficult on a number of occasions and on a number of different fronts. There are good things and there are bad things. So let me start with some of the things that really affect us. We've seen our neighborhoods, we've seen our cities, we've seen our partners, the cities and the countries and everything else, have effectively a sad and brutal impact. It has affected people's jobs, it's affected health, it's affected the whole dynamic in terms of how we interact with each other and how commerce interacts. Now, the positive aspect of it, and again, I hate to say positive for what I consider a global crisis and a tragedy, but the positive side in this has been that what we have been advocating and what we've been warning people, where commerce was going to change, fundamentally has been accelerated. So instead of waiting 5 years for something to happen, it has happened really over the last year, and that trend is here to stay. So effectively, we have seen, and again, this is not localized, this is what's interesting. We have seen the fundamental shift in terms of consumers, and not just consumers, but quite frankly also suppliers, changing how they work, how they evolve. They're effectively forced to adapt new methods, specifically around delivery, and also interacting and managing their workforce, contact tracing to give an example, temperature checks to give a secondary example, et cetera, et cetera. They've been forced to do this almost overnight. In other words, we've seen a change in commerce, we've seen a change in workforce management, we've seen a change in inertia, I guess you want to call it, corporate inertia. And equally important, what has happened is it has crystallized for us, at least in terms of what we're seeing, by seeing which organizations have been innovative and adaptive, moving quickly, and which have struggled and been effectively forced to make the change in order to survive. So COVID has been difficult. Personally on our end, we lost 2 people in our company due to COVID, which was a horrible, horrible tragedy. But the flip side on that, it has opened up commercial opportunities that weren't there before.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear about what happened with some of your employees. And it is an incredible environment, and it has been extremely impactful. I found it interesting. I was writing myself a bit of an overview of NEO 2020, and like you, the first thing you have to acknowledge is how the entire society has been impacted. But like you, we had that same phenomenon of seeing acceleration in the business model, because new technologies are being adopted much faster. So if you look at that from a business growth perspective, from a revenue perspective, it must have been beneficial. How long have you been operating? And if you look at the evolution of your revenue, could you tell us a little bit about how that has been evolving, particularly stressing, of course, how 2020 compared to 2019?
Yeah. So I may bore certain people who are listening now with the data. Some, of course, are going to find this fascinating. So just kind of keep in mind that what I'm giving you are numbers that we obviously publicly declared. So we're not sharing any confidential information. I'm going to, give the numbers out originally as they were stated, which is an AUD, which is equivalent to Canadian dollars, Australian versus Canadian dollars. Although going forth, obviously, we're going to be reporting in Canadian and US dollars. So we've been around for about 5-6 years. We originally started as a company called Liquor Run. We were actually delivering alcohol, booze. And GetSwift grew out of that in the sense that we found that we needed to scale up quickly. There were no solutions out there that would allow us as a small business to scale up. And we ended up developing our own technology to solve our own problem, our own issue. And we had this epiphany almost overnight where we looked at it, we deployed it. And almost overnight, our costs started decreasing, our profit started improving, our scalability started going forth. We started eliminating a call center, because we used to have three or four dozen people on a call center, just handling, dispatching, routing, etc. That almost went away overnight, and we said, "Hang on a minute, we actually have a product here that is better than the actual business that was started." So in that segue, the numbers that I'm going to talk about are based upon that new product. In 2016, we had about $370,000 in top line revenue. In 2017, 482. Good growth. You would say small company growing. In 2018, 1.477 million. So almost $1.5 million. In 2019, so now we're talking about, crisis and everything else, 3.8 million. And then finally, now in 2020, we reported as of June, obviously June, our fiscal year was ended in June 2020. And we reported for the year a little over 26 million. So as you can see, the growth has been amazing. And now, granted, a chunk of that growth was also as a result of our acquisitions of certain companies, expanding our, portfolio offerings, etc. So it's not obviously all growth within one component. There was a number of components. But the other piece of data that I look at that it's also very, very impactful in that sense, if I look at the compounded annual growth rate, right? So if we look at 2017, 30%. If we look at 2018, that was about 100%. If we look at 2019, that was about 118%. And then finally, the 2020 was 191%. We also had, 15 to 16 quarters of, again, increased revenues. So it has been, I would say, something remarkable to say. And I'll share another data point with you and with everybody that's listening here that I think is important. So across our whole platform, we have about 13,500, 13,600 exchanges. It's changing on a daily basis. Merchants that have signed onto the platform. Now, I will state this just from a past historical perspective. We're a SaaS company. That does not mean that every single merchant is using that platform on a daily basis and everything else. They have a capability to stop, start, and everything else. If you know how SaaS platforms work. Again, please read the prospectus, do your own diligence. But here's an important data point. When we talk about the acceleration of the growth. Right now, on what I would call a normal, it's called modality, we see anywhere between 38 to 43 new merchants sign up on a weekly basis. Now, for what I consider ourselves a high growth company that effectively has moved out of the startup phase, 38 to 40 something is not bad under any set of circumstances. But let me give you a data point at what I call the peak of COVID, or what I call the awakening, right? Where companies, especially in the North American markets, kind of had this epiphany. We saw up to 154 companies sign up on a weekly basis. I mean, it was just like an epiphany where people realized effectively, holy moly, if we do not get on this, if we don't resolve this problem, our competitors are going to eat our lunch, our customers are going to abandon us, and the cost of retention acquisition is going to be quite problematic. I will give you, again, one more important aspect of it, an area that we targeted that I think a lot of people completely missed. And I would even say some of the bigger guys that are operating in the Fortune 100 were having problems penetrating. I'm referring to the farm-to-table market. Now, the farm-to-table market, I think, has been overlooked. Why? It's not sexy. It's not what I would call easy. And what do I mean by that? If you look at a lot of the competition out there, and even some of the big players in this particular market, they'll play in what I call metropolises, big urban zones, right, where there's huge density. You know, the numbers are there for them, etc. That is fantastic, and they should be congratulated on that. But here's my personal passion and personal corporate culture. Without good jobs for economies and for little cities and, you know, small little counties and everything else, without a vibrant economy, the big cities are going to be impacted as well. So we need to, whatever we end up doing in terms of COVID, in terms of any technology solutions, we also have to be instruments of job creation. And I'm talking about good, sustainable jobs. Now, here's what's also critical for us, what we've seen that we were ecstatic about it, and why I keep talking about the farm-to-table market. For the big players, you know, if I turn around and I tell them, look, you have one small business that's going to go from doing $10,000 a month in gross revenues to $16,000 a month, it's not even a rounding error. It doesn't make any difference for them. But I cannot begin to tell you what an impact it's had on the mom and pops, on small town, on Main Street, where you have now a dozen businesses that were struggling literally to meet their bills, what that $6,000 means to them. It becomes a viable business. It means being able to send their children to school. It means being able to expand. It means being able to hire additional staff. Let me give you some examples. In the last 2 years, in that particular sector, we've seen a 100% increase merchants coming onto our platform. This has been the delighted aspect of it. We have seen that their average basket, meaning, again, what they sell in terms of basket delivery to a particular customer, almost doubled to over $80 per basket. Now, think about it for a second. Even if you don't increase the number of customers, you've now got the position you're selling twice as much. And that doesn't even talk about the increase of customers. We have seen, and we have reports, I'll give you an example, dairy farms that come back to us and said, wow, and this is a few months later, I'm buying 2 additional vans, and I'm actually hiring people to increase my penetration. That is something that makes us excited. Now, granted, yes, we do derive a benefit from it. Again, that's what we're in the business from it. But there is a certain absolute delight that you sit there and you look at it and you go, wow, you know, we're making an impact. We are helping small towns. We're helping small businesses expand in addition to large businesses. And I'll give you one more data point. Forgive me for taking so long, but there's a sense of passion that I have for this. We look at the amount of goods, the value of goods, by the way, that are going through our platform in that particular sector, just in that particular sector. And the latest number that I saw was more than $25 million a month in goods in that small little sector gets delivered. And I personally think we haven't even tapped, the majority of that particular sector. It's just let's call it a POC. That's a very, very POC, proof of concept. That's a very, very, very important and difficult segment that we tapped into.
No, great story. And I got to admit, I love the component of, you know, of course, you're a commercial business. We are a commercial business. But you add really to that the societal benefit, a societal value component, which you know we try to do also. We believe is very important. Now, looking at what you said, I see a great technology company, because that's what you are at the end of the day. I see a great technology company. I see growth, not different necessarily than what I see, when I look at the markets. Like we see how technology companies that for everyone are clearly going to be part of the economy of tomorrow are outperforming. That is the kind of spot that you are in also. And then you add on top of that, because I'm not sure I can say that necessarily for everyone, but you add on top of that, truly giving value to the community, and helping in growing the economy. So I think it's great, but it's going to take me to another question. So we see the growth, we understand why it's accelerating. How about the profitability? How's that doing?
Well, good question, an interesting question, and always a tough question. There's the old adage here, right? I'm going to say there's three levels of complexity. The first level of complexity that everybody talks about is, do you slow down your growth in exchange for profitability? I tend to point out to Jeff Bezos and Amazon, and I think I may have mentioned this. I get inspired by seeing some of his old photos and videos. They had this little video of him sitting in this dark, dingy office and everything else, and working away, and everybody thought he was just this crazy bookseller, and everybody kept harassing him, telling him, what about profitability? What about profitability? Look, profitability has its place, but then the decision needs to be made: at what point in time do you focus on profitability at the expense of growth, and can you do both? I wish we could do both if we had, let's call it both the runway and what I would call the level of, let's call it, market maturity. It's not there. So for us, it's a very, very fine line. Having said that, our focus is going to be on growth, with a clear indication that two things. One, we're obviously going to be focusing on our margins, and we're going to be focusing on our operating expenses, which we're going to be looking to obviously streamline and improve. We also find, and again, this is not a sales pitch for Neo or anything else along those lines, but we find ever since we moved on to Neo, we moved into focusing on all our operations in the North American market away from Australia, to be very beneficial to us in terms of costs, very beneficial in terms of for growth and profitability. So at some point, yes, we're going to be focusing on profitability. Right now, like I mentioned, the number that we had published as of 2020 June was an ARR of about 26 million AUD. My goal for the company, and again, this is not a forward projection. I want to make this very clear. It's not a forward projection. My goal for the company is for us to hit $100 million ASAP, or as soon as possible. That's the focus that the team has. That's the focus that the organization has. Also, our focus is obviously, again, to reduce our overall costs. And again, the fact, there's the old adage, the fact that I think we're going to be not subject so much to the onerous, let's call it, political pressures and costs associated with fighting certain political entities is going to help us tremendously in that respect.
Very interesting. And you're a real growth company. That's what we talk about here, and it's about getting the market share and the revenue. Now, it's one thing to say I want to hit the $100 million ASAP. It's another thing to do it. What's your strategy?
Several levels, right? Never have a single point of failure, right? So we are not a company that has one product and we're going to roll the dice on that one product. My view on that is, having come from a technology and a product background, and at heart I'm a product guy, is that if you're not evolving, you're dying. That's one of my favorite sayings. If you're not evolving, you're dying. It's just a question of how quickly you're going to be dying. So never have a single point of failure. Look at the data that we're getting into, have a good, what I call, predictive model, predictive analytics. Now, I also want to stress this. This is very important in terms of customers and protection. The data that we have, the data that we use, belongs to our customers. We anonymize it. We anonymize the data, and then we use that anonymized data to make certain decisions. We do not sell data. We have no intention of selling that data. We will not give that data to any of our partners. Period. We look to protect the brands, the identities, and the privacy of all our customers above all else. So first is product strategy in terms of having a diversified product portfolio. You'll see we started purely with, let's call it, routing and tracking and dispatching software. We've now moved into e-commerce, workforce management, infrastructure, etc. We have also furthermore started looking very heavily on our, what I call, patent strategy. So we've been granted 3 provisional patents. There's more patents coming down the line. Again, R&D is an important component and flexibility for that R&D. The second thing is focusing on the markets that make sense, right? So we are in over 70 different verticals, meaning 70 different types of businesses, whether it's flowers, hardware, etc. So that's what I mean by that. But we're in over more than 70 countries. What I mean by being more than 70 countries, I'm not talking that we have a physical presence in over 70 countries. I'm referring to the fact that our software is utilized in more than 70 countries. So part of that strategy, what people did not realize what we were doing, is putting seeds out and then collecting the information on those seeds. And again, one of the things that I think is very frustrating is sometimes it's very hard to indicate what somebody's strategy is unless you're so far ahead that it won't matter if you share that strategy. So it's very difficult sometimes to turn around to the market and the shareholders and say, well, I can't tell you. What are you doing? And there's nothing I can really tell you. Well, where we are right now is we've laid a lot of seeds out. And we have started during this period of time to collect the information based upon where these seeds are. So now we have a much better idea where to, should we say, put additional efforts in, which areas we will not decide to work with anymore. We might even decide to say, look, this just doesn't make any sense for us because the amount of effort that goes in is really not worth it. And you'd be surprised what some areas are, should we say, conducive to growth, and some areas are not. So let me give you an example, which I think is interesting. We worked with a number of, should we say, big brands, right, and important brands, Heineken, KFG/Yum, etc. And we're talking about in areas that you would think, my God, what are you people doing? So I'll give you two examples. Egypt and Pakistan. Fabulous countries. But the fact is, from an infrastructure perspective, from a deployment perspective, if you talk about being a Canadian company and going in there and saying to your board or saying to somebody, hey, folks, we're going to be doing business there, we're going to be launching there, they're going to start thinking about, do you really have proper risk management plan, etc. Well, what a lot of people didn't realize is that by taking that approach, if you can solve a difficult problem in a difficult area, then anything else that comes down the line is by a quantum easier to fix. So for us, that has now resulted, obviously, in us doing business in Saudi Arabia, Oman, etc., areas that our competitors will not touch or walk in just from a complexity standpoint. So the point there is, again, being able to execute. You can have the best product in the world, you can have the best ideas and everything else. If you're unable to execute and execute in a timely manner, it's also problematic. So what are we going to do? Target specifically and execute quickly and fast. The third thing is sustainability, right? So the question here being is the business and the product that you have sustainable? Is the revenue sustainable? Now, yes, I always tell this to my shareholders. Look, there's going to be cycles. There's going to be peaks and periods, and that they're going to go up and down. But I also look at some of our competitors, and you can't tell me year after year that if you're doing a couple $100,000 per quarter, that is a high growth business. It isn't. You have to translate whatever KPIs you want to use, whether it is widgets or whether it's red balloons. It doesn't really matter. At some point, you have to be able to translate that into sustainable revenue. And yes, that revenue is going to go up and down. But again, that revenue also needs to be able to translate that you can show that the product that you have has the capability to translate into revenue. And then really the model is, how do you tweak it to ensure that growth? So for us, it's going to be what I call measured scalable growth that is going to require some patience, but that in my opinion, that the fundamentals are there. The fundamentals are there for a great company, a great product that continues to evolve, a suite of products, let's call it, that has proven its value in the most difficult times, and again, across a horizontal. We're not niche specialized. I used to joke around. I said, the way the crazy world operates, how do we know that tomorrow somebody's not going to write, a law that says all fast food is illegal? It's bad for you, it's illegal. And by the way, folks, for those of you who are listening to this, you will understand that I get this analogy because at one point the mayor of New York outlawed in movie theaters and certain other areas cups that were too much, so we say, a sufficiently large size that it was considered that if you drank soda from it, it would be illegal. So the joke that I used to, So the joke that I used to say, so what happens if they decide that fast food is illegal? Never happened, but what decides? It's an analogy. Well, for us, there would be an impact. But again, I turn around and I say, hey, food, and including fast food, only represents currently about 33% of our new business. So what does that mean? Worst case scenario, we have another 60 some odd percent of various businesses that we can adjust. And again, food is easy, and food is something that you can quickly demonstrate value. But I think where a lot of our competitors have made a mistake, and by the way, this is free advice, they've made the mistake of actually being, let's call it niche specialists, as opposed to being generalists.
So what I hear is vision. I hear a clear strategy. I was going to talk about your global views and methods about going global, but I think you already answered it. I hear execution. I also heard, in fact, diversification. All great items and great components for a growth company. Well, we don't say great components, critical components for a growth company. Now, let me come to a word that you used quite a few times. You used the word competitors, and you gave already a couple of answers when you talked about certain of their behaviors. But what would you say, if you look at your organization, makes you uniquely different from your competitors in a nutshell?
Well, the first thing I would say is resilience. Resilience above all else. I would say the more pain we felt, the more pain we feel, the better we get, the stronger we get. I'm going to say this, and we're not unique. When I say we're not unique, I look at humanity. Humanity, if you think about it, regardless where you come from, regardless what your background is, humanity has achieved some remarkable things under adverse conditions. We've been forced to innovate. Humanity's been forced to innovate. So I think the first thing that I would kind of point out is that as a team, as an organization, adversity has made us smarter and better. And pain sometimes is helpful. The second thing that makes us different, I would say, is our ability to, and I hate to use this term pivot, but I would like to use the term more have robust discussions, both with our customers and with everybody else. So what do I mean by that? So we don't go in and we don't sell the solution. Now you're going to look at it and say, well, you're not doing your job. How can you not sell the solution? How can you not sell the product? You have this fantastic thing that the product does. Why are you not selling it? Because that's missing the point. We go in, and the first question is, let's say that if you had a business, I would ask you, what are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? The second thing I would ask you is, what do you perceive your problems are within, obviously, the ecosystem that we're talking about? Third thing that I would ask you is, right, how much time do you have? Again, these are not questions that people ask. And the last item obviously goes down to, what tools do you have in order to make this happen? And then what we do is we work with our partners and our clients to figure out, first of all, what their problem is. And then once we do that, here's where the magic actually happens. The magic is we start getting support from the C-suite, where the C-suite, again, turns around and says, you know what, they're not a vendor. Yeah, we're paying them, but they're not a vendor. They're actually here. They're not a risk for us. They're not a threat for us. They're actually a force multiplier for us. And I have yet to see a C-suite that is not going to turn away something that effectively only has a potential upside. There is no downside. So that, I think, is a critical distinction for us as we go in. And one of the things that personally, our founder, Joe McDonald, and the rest of our team, and I can call out a number of people there, stressed from day one, which was we have to be a slightly different company in that respect. People are not going to be able to understand it, but go in and first of all, understand what the business objective is, what the pain points are, and then overlay what we have as opposed to selling a piece of software per se.
Yeah. And Bane, I know you and I've met your team, and for everyone in the audience, I can say very impressive team. So I think the organization is in very good hands. We have not much time left, and I got two questions. And one is really important. The other one is a nice to have. The important one is you are now listed on the Neo exchange. You are accessible for trading, from every place on the planet, I guess. But I'm an investor, and I look at your stock, and I look at the price, and I think about your story, and I go like, looks good. Seems to be working on something great. Why should I invest now? Why should I buy your stock now? Should I have bought it earlier, or when you were only making 400,000, or should I wait a little bit to see more?
So, great question. And here is my somewhat humorous observation, but with poignant truth, as I kind of call it. The most recent interesting aspect of it is that once we had announced that we were delisting off of the Australian exchange and coming on to Neo, there was a bit of, I would say, panic and lack of understanding what that entailed. Our share price got cut in half, and the fundamentals did not change. So, like for like, I think that if you look at the share price today, it's a bloody bargain. It's a bloody bargain in terms of where it was. Two, again, I'm not going to tell analysts or anybody else to do their job, but take a look at our top line, take a look at the direction we're heading, add your own multiples, and again, you're going to see that our market cap right now is substantially what I would call underpriced. Three, I think that there's still a lack of understanding in what we do. Sometimes when you're so far in front in terms of what you mentioned, the vision, the execution, everything else, people scratch their heads and say, well, we're having a hard time kind of understanding. So let me just address one thing, because it was actually a shareholder that sent out this question. They said, well, could you explain logo? We were having a hard time understanding logo. And I said, well, think of it this way. One, your ability to integrate and execute is just as important as your product. So if you don't have the ability to integrate and execute, it's an issue. And second, today, larger enterprises and everything else are starting to think in terms of hub and enterprise models. If you don't have an entrance into those enterprise and hub models, you're going to have a significant amount of time being spent trying to enter there, trying to integrate with somebody else, instead of being at the forefront of that integration, at the forefront of that change. Again, if you go into, and I'm going to say, like in a hospital, let's use a hospital as an example, because we're solving issues. It's not going to be very helpful if you turn around and say, I have a surgeon, I have a nurse and everything else, but we don't know anything about anesthesia. Is that okay? I'm sure you'll be fine, or vice versa. So again, you have to think of it of a comprehensive process on it. The other thing that I would also say is that, it goes both up and down in that respect. There's been, as you know, a little bit of a, should we say, challenge getting some of the, what do you call, shares from overseas into registered here. So that has had an effect. And then I would also say that it's a lack of, to some extent, understanding and visibility and the risks associated with a company. Let's call it for what it is. I have never in my career ever seen the level of frothiness that I have seen in terms of, when we were in Australia, what the local media have done. I have never seen the level of, let's call it, pure politics, not based on merit, pure politics that was involved in terms of the attention to our company. And there's the old adage that my great-grandfather taught me, and he said the following: if you have that much attention, that means you have something that's worthwhile. Nobody looks twice at a destitute, poor individual who's sitting in a corner with nothing there. The only time people pay attention to you is that either you have something, they're trying to take it away from you, or they feel threatened. So I would say this: it's good to be a disruptor. It's good to have questions being asked. But I will also say this: originally, I think people thought that we were vaporware. The joke is on them, because I think that if you look at, I guess, some of the announcements that we've had recently, just since we've come on Neo, Famous Dave's, and I have to give them a plug-in, by the way. God bless Famous Dave's, because they're just adding pounds to my waistline. But they have some fantastic food. But they looked at our solution and said, guys, you're it. You're definitely going to complement what we're doing, and we're going to be able to service our customers even better than before. You can't do that with vaporware. You can't do that without a team that has the ability to execute. So I'd like to think that we are a company that has an incredible platform, and I know that's an overused term, but a platform, a series of services, an amazing team. We are a company that I think was misunderstood and still misunderstood to a certain aspect of it. But that resilience, that attention, that interest, that hostility, I guess if you want to call it, or the attempts of people to, I would say, potentially not only short the company but potentially acquire the company for pennies on the dollar, points to one thing: we have something that's unique. So I would be very thankful, and I would, obviously encourage everybody to do their own research and take a look at it. But I think that GetSwift now represents a unique opportunity for the smart investor.
Yeah. Bane, I always find it so fascinating when I listen to you. I got the impression to hear our own story, and we're in a totally different business, as you know, but people not believing in you, people saying, this is not going to work, people expecting that you're going to get into trouble. Well, I can tell you, if you have the vision, the strategy, and the execution, it works. And I'm not going to make us exchange any comments on whether investors should or should not buy your stock, obviously. But what I would recommend investors to do, and it's what you said, look at the data points that are available, try to find some comparables, and then come to your conclusion. And I think that you are at the beginning of a fascinating public life journey, and that is, besides everything you're doing, of course, from a business perspective. So very exciting story, and I think a very promising future. We ran out of time, but I'll ask you the last question. Why did you list on NEO?
I was
That
just
can
going
be very
to,
short.
yeah, I was just going to come to this. It comes to something very simple. You support the companies that are on the exchange. You're an exchange that is looking to teach, support, improve, and you work together with companies. You're not out there to what do you call, elbow people out of the way or exert, let's call it, undue pressure. Everybody has to do their job. Everybody has to do what's appropriate, but we feel and we felt that there's a level of support, number one, from NEO. It's not an adversarial relationship, let's put it that way. The second thing that we also saw is one of great technology, right? One technology company loves another technology company. You have to have that great technology that is going to enable you to effectively list effectively. Third thing, discoverability, right? If you're a technology company, you could be one of 10,000. Good luck being discovered, right? On NEO, we feel that NEO understands what it takes to, what do you call, first of all, discover the company, get some visibility. Again, what we're doing today, we would not have done that previously with the other exchange. It provides transparency. And last but not least, we believe it's a huge benefit to our shareholders and an opportunity for any company out there, quite frankly, to grow and to be discovered and fulfill its potential in what I call a supportive, safe, and transparent way. And that's why we are absolutely delighted to be able to work with you, your team, and again, we're exceptionally thankful to Canada to have received us, to have supported us, to understand what it takes to create jobs, what technology companies know about, and they should be actually, everybody, you especially and your team, should be complimented on that for that growth. So that's the reason why.
Thank you very much, Ben. Very, very nice words. We appreciate it, and I can only but say that it's what we are about. And again, I'm sure that's also why we get along that well between our organizations. Disruptors looking to make their industry, their world, whatever you want to call it, better. And I think that combination is an extremely strong and powerful combination. I would love to thank you now for the time, the openness, answering all those questions, and I'm looking forward to following your growth. And if anyone in the audience has still questions that they would like to raise or bring forward, don't hesitate to send out a little email, reach out to us, and we'll make sure that we pass it on to Bane and his team, and that answers will be provided to any open items that you may have. Bane, once again, thank you very much, and
Thank you for
sure
having
we'll
me.
see you soon again.